Hey folks, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver, and to another episode of The Shrink and the Pundit, where I, Jeff, the pundit, talk with my old friend, integral psychotherapist, Dr. Keith Witt, about all things integral. All right, so Dr. Keith, you sent me an article a few days ago that you were taken by and wanted to talk about. And I was glad to have it because it's by Otto Scharmer. And the title is Axial Shift, The Decline of Trump, The Rise of the Greens, and the New Coordinates of Social Change. And I know Otto Scharmer is an MIT professor. He is a public intellectual. And I know a lot of integral people like him. So I wanted to know more about him. And why don't you introduce it? And it's really a fertile field to plow together.
Well, I was talking to an integral guy. He was worried that in a group he was going to go to, that they would have the myth of the given and that he wouldn't be able to be part of the group. And I said, look, integral is a big tent. It's just because somebody doesn't get the myth of the given, or, that they have some kind of green, fallacy. It certainly doesn't mean that we kick them out of the tent. It just means that, we have to adjust a little bit dealing with them. Otto Scharmer, Ken says that there's knowledge by description and knowledge by acquisition. And knowledge by acquisition is knowledge that changes you. And so,
just to make sure that was clear, knowledge by acquisition is knowledge that changes you.
Yeah.
And the first is knowledge by what now?
Description.
Yep.
Where you can describe something, you can learn something, but it doesn't change you necessarily. It's a fact. It might be an interesting fact, but it's not embodied in a particular way. It doesn't shift the system. And so Scharmer noticed this early in his career and developed the Scharmer U, where he said the way people really learn is they go through a series of stages, which interesting to me kind of mapped the stages of ceremony, which was very popular in Brazil, by the way, the stages of ceremony. Where they go down into an experience that creates some confusion, going back to complexity theory, which creates a crisis of some sort where they kind of have to struggle with something, receive influence. It creates a sense of clarity, greater complexity, which creates a sense of possibility, which leads them into a new level of complexity. And he's had research that supports that, and it's been quite useful, and people have adopted it. And he started a program in Europe where he brought 50 people from around the world, and all of them together to say, let's see if we can be a seed that can kind of support the evolution of consciousness. Because as is detailed in this article, he sees that the hope of the future is the evolution of consciousness. And of course, we always like people who agree with us. I like Otto because Otto agrees with me. I've been saying this for years, that there's enough money, and there's enough technology, and there's enough people, there's not enough consciousness to activate all that stuff and solve all the problems. So after the 2016 election, where there's the Democrats came in, looking at how people.
So this is the election 2 years into the Trump presidency. The Democrats basically win the House, which is very significant. Here we are. So this is when this was written, whatever it is.
Right. And for him, he was seeing this. So it caused him to go, okay, he was paying attention to the discourse, and not being a particularly integrally informed person, came up with his own analysis of it. So, similar in a lot of ways to Ken, the post-truth analysis, but with a few little clicks. Okay. One thing is, he said that liberal conservative doesn't make any sense to him. What makes sense to him is open and closed. Now, when he goes into closed, he goes into some green rage at the pathological aspects of previous memes. But, to a certain extent, he has a point. Now, what part of the point he doesn't make is that both sides have things to offer. That the stability that is at the core of conservatism, that sense of going into depth and community and then extending that's a healthy part of it. And so that was a little bit missed in his analysis, but that's okay. So he said, rather than liberal conservative, he looks at open and closed, which makes more sense. And open systems receive influence, open systems evolve, open systems are interested in moving forward. Basically, he's whether he's doing it directly or unconsciously, he's describing basically second tier understanding, felt appreciation from multiple points of view, the inadequacy of language, the sense of constant development being the organizing principle of the 21st century and beyond for human beings.
Yep.
And then he looked at the closed system, and the closed system, he looked at all the pathologies that keep people from wanting personal evolution, which is the objectifying, denying, avoiding, looking away, all those kinds of things. So he said that axis made more sense to him than liberal and conservative. But he said there's other axes that are happening in the world also. He said another axis is the axis between gross national product and well-being of the people. That the well-being, that he believes that in the countries where the well-being of the people matter, they're willing to sacrifice 0.5%, maybe 1% of growth in the interest of upping the well-being of the people by 20 or 30 or 40%. In happiness surveys and in ecological evaluations, that really works. Because in those systems, it's going back to a management model where an outcome isn't just an economic outcome. You also have a social outcome and an ecological outcome. Business, in other words, if we have a deep purpose in our business, we want the outcome to be success of the business materially, but also we want to have a positive effect on the world and a positive effect on people. Okay, so those three outcomes, if they're all important, make for super healthy businesses. And so he says, well-being taken into account as a dimension makes for a super healthy country. And he's right, in terms of the countries that do that, they have healthier people, they have more ecological, sustainable, less carbon emissions. They have problems, but they don't have the same kind of problems in countries where they don't do that, like our country.
It's that part of Otto Scharmer's article that I agree with and recognize as integral and really support is that he's talking about the next stage. I'm not sure it's integral in a certain way, but what it is it's certainly the healthy green that we want to take into integral. Yes. And that is moving from growth to sustainability as an economic system, just as a mindset. And he has a growth to well-being. I mean, I love that.
Also, egocentric to ecocentric.
Exactly. So educate the whole child, ego systems awareness so ego to eco, ECO. Yeah. And that's just classic development. You're moving from egocentric, ethnocentric to, world-centric. And so I celebrate that part. But I have to say that his analysis is, I think, actually in the category of mean green.
Yeah.
Starting with the idea of open and closed, where he situates progressive liberalism on the open end of the axis and conservatism on the closed end, which is true, has a certain intuitive truth, as long as you try to see the piece of the truth that both of those positions hold. And try not to do what each side does, which is to define the other side by their worst aspects.
Okay.
And so he defines closed as the mindset that amplifies the triad of fear, hate, and ignorance.
Right. That's what I mean.
And he, and it manifests in blinding, which is not seeing reality, desensing, which means not empathizing with others, absencing, losing the connection to one's highest future, blaming others, the inability to reflect, and then finally destroying, the destruction of nature, relationships, and self. And I know, and I just think that integral could do better than that.
I agree.
See that, there's a implication in that these people who are on that bottom part of his axis, that they're fallen in some way. They've fallen from some state, or they're defective in some way that we aren't. And we got it and they don't. And I just think integral gives us an opportunity to have a far more generous view, in my opinion, which is that, everybody can see what they can see and no further, and everybody actually gets to live their life seeing what they see, and that every worldview sees things that other worldviews are blind to, which gets me curious. What do they, my opponents, see that I'm missing? As we develop, we lose things that at integral, we want to reintegrate. I always use the example of an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old. You know, you would never say of an 8-year-old relative to a 12-year-old that they are not seeing reality, or they're not empathizing with others, or they're losing the connection with self, or they're destroying nature, relationships, and self. That would feel abusive.
Yeah.
And
also,
actually, I think what he's doing and what he's talking about is, of course, the liberal line, but it's actually abusive. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't allow what you've talked about all the time. In fact, just I think in this talk about what moves us forward is the ability to be influenced. And you're not going to get there with this kind of an analysis.
Absolutely. And particularly, again, by identifying the things that are wrong, by the unhealthy aspects of the worldview, it is just so pervasive. And I agree. And, you know, and by the way, Green isn't the only one that does that. All the value memes fight with the other value memes by identifying the ridiculous or the unhealthy aspects of them and identifying them by the ridiculous, unhealthy aspects.
Yeah, that's right.
And also,
and this guy's doing the same thing. I think
that he is with the open versus closed because he's not coming up with a healthy version of closed.
Yeah, exactly. Remember? I mean, you want to talk about closed. How about a system that has disenchanted the world?
Yeah.
How about, you know, God is banished, that the transcendent is banished, that things like dignity and obedience are quaint, you know, or oppressive. You know, that's how conservatives see liberals.
Right.
You know, that we've closed, you know, we've reduced the world to we're some sort of accident of molecules that are hurtling around on a rock. I mean,
so there's some validity, you know, that's unhealthy Green. So yeah, so if you want to identify progressives by their unhealthy side, those are absolutely the unhealthy sides of Green.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're valid critiques.
Yes.
And the other thing is, you don't influence somebody by convincing them that they're evil.
Right. Yeah. No, that's the thing, is I wouldn't mind his analysis if I didn't think that it actually impeded his diagnosis, you know, or his cure.
Well, practically speaking. So here's the thing, in my opinion. So the whole open versus closed. Now, I think open versus closed actually works if you're looking from a system standpoint and you're not pathologizing either side, because that certainly works in families.
Fair enough.
It certainly works in organizations. You know, when you take in input from the outside, you do better. When you don't take in input from the outside, you do worse. So in terms of receiving influence, now, there are people now this is where it gets more complicated. So there's people that he would define as open that I would define as closed because they're not receiving influence. Okay? Yeah. So if somebody is self-defined as open and they go, well, the way for me to be with conservatives is contemptuous and dismissive, I'd go, you know, I think that's a closed perspective. I think the way to be with every human being is respectful and interested. And, you know, here's the thing about development, and this is an integral perspective that is politically incorrect with Green. I frankly see a lot of things that other people don't see. So if I'm talking to somebody that doesn't see something, or if I have more depth of consciousness, I have more responsibility in that situation to manage the dialectic in a positive way. And you know, it's not equal. Okay. I am seeing more.
No, it's so true, Keith. That realization is very difficult and scandalous.
It's scandalous.
It's scandalous.
Right.
You know, they talk about the scandal of Christianity is that Jesus died for your sins, and if you don't see that, you're going to go to hell. I mean, that's and every new view has a sort of scandalous quality. And integrals is that there are stages of development among adults.
Yeah. That some people actually see more than other people and
Yes.
have more responsibility
Yes.
in situations.
Yes.
And one responsibility we have is to catch our own contempt and to dialysize it into respect. Okay. Which he doesn't do with open versus closed, because he's just as pissed off as Rachel Maddow and everybody else at the indignant.
Well, my Jeff liberal is right there with them.
Yeah,
These assholes. And actually, I think there's another distinction we can make here, Keith, that'll help us clarify this conversation. And that is, when we're talking about conservatives, we could talk about, the sort of conservatives, or if you want to call them closed or whatever. But in terms of development, we're talking about the amber meme or the blue meme.
Yeah.
There's the red meme. Mm-hmm. The red meme ought not be given the assumption of good faith. Now, the red meme is the stage before amber, so before traditionalism, and that is I'm out for myself. It's basically egocentric. Now, from a developmental standpoint, there it is, and it has its certain qualities. It's certainly alive, got a lot of energy. It's got some stuff we want, but this is what confuses I think the contemporary political conversation. Trump's red.
Yeah.
His followers are largely blue amber, mm-hmm. but he's red. And so while we can ascribe good faith to people, who follow him, and conservatives as in general, and this system that Otto Scharmer calls closed, we want to ascribe good faith to them, but there are people, they're actually pre-good faith. And I don't even say that in a way of condemning them. It's just that doesn't make a lot of sense to them. It's like life is not a good faith, whatever.
Well, and also you hurt me, I hurt you.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a certain intelligence to that at a certain level of development.
Well, that's red morality.
Human beings lived for most of our existence.
That's red morality. For Trump, weirdly, if somebody attacked him and he didn't attack him back, he would be behaving in an immoral fashion.
Exactly.
Violating his own moral standards.
He'd be irresponsible.
That's irresponsible. My responsibility if someone attacks me is to attack them back.
Yeah. And that's actually a certain kind of honor code. One of the things it does is it makes people think twice before they attack you. Well, welcome to creating as much safety as you can in a world that is pre-legal.
Well, and what's frustrating Trump the most? The judiciary. Yeah. They won't let him execute people and fuck people up and throw people into jail and do all the things he wants to do. He's so frustrated. Now, so I agree with that in terms of, and also the thing that bothered me about the, and this is another green pathology, that bothered me about the analysis is that when he gets around to educating the whole child, okay, so if I want to, and I agree with that, educate the whole child.
Well, me too. Yeah.
All right, so if I'm telling people that they're closed down and evil and fucked up, they're not going to really see me as an expert around helping their children grow. Okay, I need to be able to, and most people, when you meet with person to person, they're a good person. Okay? Even red people, if you don't cross them,
yes, totally.
they'll deal with you person to person. That we all have instincts to be social and to be socially engaged.
People who know Trump say he's quite a character. He's very entertaining. He's a lot of fun.
Oh, I had a client a woman who said he was never anything but a gentleman around her because she was in a psychological position in his world that he respected her. Okay, it's like 19th century England. There were the prostitutes and call girls you go party with, but then there were the ladies that you had to be polite to. Mm-hmm. It was just that kind of morality.
I get that. Yeah.
So I agree with your critique of Scharmer, and it's interesting to me because I know Marcelo was integrally informed, and I know he hangs out with Otto, and I'm gonna ask Marcelo next time I talk to him, has he ever had conversations with Otto about this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
If I ever
it leads to and Scharmer does this in the article. It talks about the appointment of Kavanaugh as polluting the Supreme Court. No. It's so, in the climate thing, any kind of questioning of the climate catechism is, makes you a bad person or makes you a bad faith. And I'm just so tired of it.
It's irritating. I can tell it irritates you, doesn't it?
I'm very irritated by it. And, I think it's in a way right on schedule. We're supposed to be irritated by the stage that we're trying to claw our way out of,
Well,
but I have that too. I mean, well, go on, Keith, sorry.
Well, what makes me wonder, and I don't know Otto, maybe I'll find out, maybe I'll meet him sometime. I might, I've been meeting a lot of extraordinary people the last few years. I'm interested in how much he'd be interested in this critique himself. Would it be something that would cause him to reevaluate and up his game? I mean, Integral has forced you and me to up our game again and again and again.
Yeah.
You are at this point, you're instinctively suspicious of any system that has a good evil axis.
I am.
I mean,
right.
That's not a conscious thing with you anymore. That's knowledge by acquaintance. That's your unconscious going, there's something wrong here. Where is it? Where's the wrongness? Yep. And I'm kind of the same way.
Yep.
Though I liked the idea, though, of him trying to shift into a direction away from liberal and conservative.
Yeah, I do too.
I understand it
totally.
Yeah.
And I actually, there's part of me that is still undecided about the value of condemning and the value of just getting in the fucking arena and fighting and treating people like enemies. I think there's a place for that somehow. I don't know. What I do know is that if we do engage in that kind of behavior, we want to do it skillfully in the way of a Zen master. That is, you cut off somebody's head cleanly. Yes.
You don't
enjoy it too much.
Mimo Musashi says, you cut, you don't slash.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing that I'm fond of saying is that there's never a situation where it's warranted to be disrespectful. I can tell somebody I think that they're engaging in immoral acts and believe it. And say, in my standard, that's an immoral act. It's an immoral act to bias GDP an extra half point to cause a certain amount of suffering in people. That's not moral in my standard, but apparently it's moral in yours. I can express that moral disagreement respectfully. If somebody thinks it's fine to humiliate another person, I'm going to interrupt them in my presence. I don't let people do that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to interrupt them respectfully. I do that with couples all the time, and say, look, I don't want.
I imagine you're one of the best people on the planet at doing that. After 50 years of psychotherapy and couple.
God. It makes me think about it. I mean, every time that happens, I'm not thinking about something that happened a year ago. I'm thinking that something that happened yesterday morning. I mean, but so you can always be respectful, and you can have a moral disagreement. Now, in terms of condemning, saying that I think it is wrong to hurt people. I think that it's wrong to have concentration camps of immigrants in the United States. That's a form of condemnation. I think it's morally wrong. I think it's politically wrong. I think it's psychologically wrong. I think it's wrong on every level. Okay. And I know that it's a complex system. The people that I feel really bad for, all the people that are trying to administer those things without enough resources because they're being starved for resources by the administration.
Yep.
Can you imagine being somebody there who's trying to keep order in that situation, not getting enough food, not getting enough medical stuff? Not getting the support that they want. I mean, it's just a mess. So I think that it's good to condemn.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that it's good to do the best job we can at understanding it. Yeah. And there are people who support this that aren't bad people. And what they're saying, their worldview is in a way grounded in the sense that they realize that there's no non-hurt option. There's no option where somebody's not going to be hurt.
Yeah.
So let's just pause right there and let that in, because so much of what passes for political outrage, is political outrage, is the acceptance of reality versus one's fantasy of how things ought to be.
Right.
And every stage has their own fantasy about how things ought to be. And the conservatives, or the closed people, their fantasy is that America has a certain quality of culture, that multiculturalism, enough already with the we liberals have no idea how we have instituted multiculturalism in the public discourse of this country.
Oh, yeah.
We have no idea how we have won that argument. Also globalism, which is the sort of the modern hegemony. And traditionalists are like, we're suffocating here. You know, and we can see that as racist, and we can see that as brutal, and we can see that, but what it is actually the functioning of an adult at a traditional stage of development that doesn't see outside their ethnic group, or it starts getting fuzzier, literally.
Well, also doesn't see the larger view of social movements. Right. So okay, talking about dealing with facts. Dealing with facts is when you have a country where you educate the women, the birth rate drops dramatically. Okay, given the current nature of industry, that means there's not going to be enough workers as people get older. Similarly, there have always been migrations, and there has almost never been anything that has successfully blocked a migration. Immigration is one thing. There are migration forces now working out of Africa to Europe and out of South America and the United States. So there's managing the migration, but you can't stop it. You know, trying to stop it. I don't know of any historical precedent of stopping a large migration movement. And there might be. Maybe I'm not enough of an historian to do it. So
we could certainly agree or stipulate that stopping a migration is never pretty.
Yeah, how could it be?
Whether or not you're successful, it ain't pretty.
Yeah, it ain't pretty. And so the larger forces, you know, there are large economic forces and dynamic forces and personal forces and so on. And where they're going, okay. And I get it. If you have a situation where people have to suffer, so we don't want our people to suffer. You know, if we have to choose between, you know, this is
certain wisdom in that.
This is amber, and you know, I have an amber part of me that is exactly like that. If someone says, well, we're going to solve the homeless problem, Keith, we're going to turn all the houses around you into multi-room homeless encampments where people can have their own rooms and they can garden in the backyard, and they're all going to be surrounding your house.
Yes.
Okay. And I go, you know, I don't really want you to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want you to change the zoning so then I have to deal with what that's going to cause me to have to deal with.
Yes.
That's my amber going, I'm protecting my borders.
Yeah.
And
a lot of liberals have the luxury of living in places where it's actually not affecting them.
Like Boulder and Santa
Not really. In fact, it's affecting them in the sense that they have more people doing their laundry and more people mowing their grass.
It's true.
You know. So, you know, I don't say any of this, and I know you don't either, in defense of brutality. You know, but an integral view just lets those all in, lets all those perspectives in, and in so doing, breathes into a larger space where we have a larger identity where that space itself has a loving intelligence.
I think that there's a certain faith in human nature that you have if you're a developmentalist, which I think is a great thing for integral. And humans want to produce and they want to do what they do well. It's very pleasurable to do something you do well. One thing that Marcelo does with companies is he'll take the employees and he does a 2-day workshop with the employees purely on what is it that lights you up and what is it that you do well. So 2 days exclusively on that, nothing to do with the company. And then on the 3rd day, they bring in what the mission is and the activities of the company, and they go, so where's the bridge between what you like to do and you do well and where you want to grow and what this company needs? You know, is there a bridge there? Is there some spot? Because the principle here is that people like doing what they do well, and they like doing what gives them goosebumps. And so we want more. And if you arrange that, people are not going to sit around and just get loaded all the time, except addicts, and then addicts.
Yeah. I think that's so true that needs to just be a pillar of any kind of social policy. And I'm still not sure there isn't a certain strata the point I'm making here is a humane one that just need to be taken care of for whatever reason. They just need to be taken care of, and they need to be taken care of at a certain level of decency that we haven't quite achieved yet.
You know where that happens? It happens I see it happening. It happens with kids with learning disabilities, sometimes autistic kids. I'm seeing in the school systems them getting a lot of support. I'm seeing in social systems, there's an understanding of we have to support them in having their lives. So what if that gets extended to people who just, can't resolve their addiction, or to people that are born with no conscientiousness? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think in general, people like to have meaning.
I do too. I'm going to go with you on that one. I'm going to say on that side of the street, because that way at least we die trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least we do our best with every person, no exceptions. Everybody's 100% in the game.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. No, I like that. But the other thing that I would say that I think integral brings us to, it's kind of a critique of Scharmer's article here, is even when he talks about whole person education or whole child education versus, just putting facts into them, as if it's something that we have to fix and move from here to there. It's actually happening.
Yeah.
It's happening. It's happening all over the place. Yeah. I mean, can we notice that? Can we see that we're not there yet, but look at what we've done, and look at these kids today, for God's sakes, Exhibit A.
Well, certainly it's more and more of an unconscious assumption that when you have smaller classes and you have people that are focusing on kids' individual development, almost everybody will go, yeah, that'll make things better. That's better. I mean, I've yet to find someone progressive or conservative who would disagree with what I just said. Okay. So I agree with that. And also we're beginning to see the fallacies of mile wide, inch deep education. Mostly what it does is it turns kids off at the age of about 11 or 12. And that's really where it's hitting.
Yeah.
And then the people that are doing research on high schools are finding again and again and again that they need the classes where you get kids that are really making something happen have reconceptualized high school. They're saying, okay, we give them basic learning, basic math, and basic reading skills, and now we find what they're interested in and we give them a challenge to make something happen that's meaningful to them. And we get people to support them in doing that. And then when kids do that, they grow and they contribute.
So, absolutely. Yeah. Each kid gets sort of their own curriculum. And one of the things that I wanted to stand up and cheer when I read this in Scharmer's article was he talked about the new digital divide.
Oh, yeah, that was great.
Isn't that something? Mm-hmm. And the new digital divide is the divide between kids who have unlimited screen time and those that have limited screen time. And I think he even talked about radically limited screen time.
He has data that says that if you limit, and middle-class kids have about half the screen time of lower socioeconomic kids, which are largely minority, but not exclusively, and they have a lot better learning outcomes. And so he says now the privileged are the people that are privileged enough to limit screen time so that their kids have to develop in other ways, rather than the people that allow the screen time that compromises.
Right.
That was fascinating.
It is, and it flips on its head the problem of 2 decades ago, which is the class of kids who had no access to the internet. That was the digital divide versus the ones who were all in it and able to learn and grow with the internet. And it turns out that, wait a minute, it's like letting a kid loose in a field of candy. It's not healthy. It's you end up with the depression and the anxiety and the likes and the dislikes and the bullying and the cyber this and it's a nightmare. It's not just a nightmare, it's also an amazing blessing.
What it was, in my opinion, is people did not quantify the significance of person-to-person contact. That human beings need a certain amount of face-to-face, person-to-person contact, and that if you you drop below critical levels of that, you start having neurological deficits and developmental arrests.
Yeah.
And you know, it's you cannot now. You and I are doing it now, but it's not like, you know, you're a video program and I'm, you know, or I'm a video. It's person to person.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
and
that
the blessing part of it is that you and I are able to talk. You know, otherwise you'd be in Santa Barbara and we'd be sending letters, you know, and sealing them with wax.
Yeah, you're right.
So, you know, it's a great thing. I see these Muslim kids on Reddit and, you know, everybody's in the game, especially these younger people. It's astonishing how they therapize each other and give each other advice and help and hear and see and be seen. And it's astonishing. But the downside, it's, you know, it's like, I think of it as a diet. You have to watch it. You know, there's some, it's like, I think a perfect example of that it can help us see the problem is porn.
Oh yeah.
And how
talk about your empty calories.
Yes, you have exactly. You have these young people who they're all self-identified. I don't know, also self-identified, but there's these groups on Reddit where they are helping each other to get rid of the porn so that they can actually have a girlfriend or a boyfriend.
Yeah, porn is the Coca-Cola of video.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the, you know, like the soda pop. It's the empty calories of video.
Yes. And there's a whole category of empty calories in the digital world that I think he identified really well. And I think that the new insight is radically limited screen time for children.
Right. And then time in nature, time with human beings.
Yes. Time in nature. Time with human beings. First and second person.
Yeah.
You know, actually third person too. Okay. But
we don't want to bias any
we want the real thing. We don't want it all digitized. We want the vinyl.
Yeah. I'm so down with that. Mm-hmm. Which is one of the reasons I love being a therapist. You know, no matter what the deal is, I get to have an hour face to face with somebody.
Oh,
you know, person to person. And so, you know, whatever's going on in an hour of us being face to face, or in a relationship that goes over time, I know that healing things happen. I know that, and I know that can't be. You can't replace that with something canned. You can't replace that with a video program. Even though, you know, I'm kind of interested in creating a relationship trainer in a box. I don't know if I'm going to end up doing that sometime.
Well, I think, you know, again, we can use this amazing tool in a way that actually creates real relationship.
Yeah, that's what I would want.
We're working on that. I think that's some of that's yet to come.
Yeah, if I did that, it would be something that encouraged people to have person-to-person contact.
Yeah.
Well,
it's, you know, if I think about what you were just saying about being a therapist, it's a little bit, you know, I write this large for sort of what we ought to be doing as a culture. And that is, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of therapy, particularly couples therapy, and I've been in some very effective couples therapy, is letting the worldview of the other person in.
Oh, it's always that.
To their satisfaction.
Always understand.
They say, yes, you got it.
Compassion and understanding.
Yeah.
The hardest thing to teach.
Yeah.
You know, couples get into it, and the hardest thing to teach is don't advocate your position. Focus on compassion and understanding your partner until they feel understood.
Yes.
If you do that, things will change.
Yes. Things will change.
It's the hardest thing to teach couples.
You don't even have to try that hard. It's just obvious what needs to happen. And that's what we need to be doing in our culture. And I think Otto Scharmer could learn that from Integral. But, you know, part of our job is to, you know, we're public intellectuals, we're critiquing other public intellectuals, and that's just, you know, how we're all moving the ball. So,
well, sure, I hope somebody comes and critiques me at some point. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be critiqued, on the other hand, but I do see
I
see the value of it for other people.
I wouldn't mind it as a dialectic. I think that would be kind of fun. I mean, certainly when people have had problems with that hardly ever happens. I got kind of an inclusive, you know, Integral, it's hard to argue with Integral.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a cosmology that includes the whole cosmos from before the beginning of time to after the end of time. Yeah. It's kind of hard to find, you know, a purchase point to argue with that. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, and you were somebody who's just fundamentally friendly. It's kind of like, oh, okay. All of a sudden, I'm disarmed. You know,
That's right.
it's cool. All right, Keith. Well, I think
We've done
we
it again.
sorted all that out
I feel better.
again, once again.
Fun talking to you about this.
Totally. And actually, to just get to what we were talking about, if somebody has a critique of us, what we're talking about, a different view, whatever, please write
Yeah.
to Jeff@dailyevolver.com, or Keith, what's your email?
Go on my website, drkeithwitt.com, and there's a link to get my email address, and just email me.
Yep.
And sign up for my website.
Yeah, same here at dailyevolver.com.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man. So anything else we need to say?
No, I think we've said it all for today.
We've said it all.
We'll check in for the next episode.
Yep, next adventure of the Shrink and the Pundit. Thank you, Dr. Keith. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. See you next time.
Much love to everybody.